So, welcoming Elaine, who, apart from being one of the wisest human beings on the planet, is also one of the service managers in our safeguarding service and a really experienced social worker. And Elaine's going to give us some top tips, 3 top tips on each side of things to do and things not to do when you are walking into a family or into individuals who may have experienced systemic inequalities such as poverty or racism, and how to create a safe space. How not think 3 things not to do, 3 things to do. So over to you, Elaine. Go. Yeah.
3 things not to do is to assume that all people of colour have the same experience. We're all different experience. The second thing I would say is, just because somebody raises their voices or is distressed or is not cooperating, don't assume they're being aggressive and frightening and scary. And the third is, just because somebody doesn't want to share all of their story with you or their experience, don't assume that they don't want to engage.
I really love those points. And actually, I think you mentioned also that different being aware of like different cultures maybe doing things in different ways.
The you know, don't assume that all, as I said, that all Black people come from the Caribbean or come from Nigeria. You know, the Caribbean, we call it small islands. We're made up of lots of small islands in the Caribbean. Africa is a very big country. The same thing. So don't assume that all Black people, all people of colour are the same.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And you kind of pointed to, I asked if you could give an example of a time where we sort of like make a sort of cultural assumption. I think you gave me a really good example about reading a family not saying I love you in a particular way. Could you like speak to that a second? Yeah.
In most cultures, or kind of, it's a very, expressing your feelings in terms of saying I love you and giving hugs is not always the same in every culture. So growing up for me, my parents wouldn't every day say I love you or give us hugs, but I know I was absolutely loved and adored by my parents, and they showed that by making sure we had food, making sure that they worked hard, that we had a roof over our head, that we went to school. When we were ill, we were taken care of, and that we had a real sense of pride. So don't assume when you're going into a house that you come back and say that person's got no emotional warmth, they didn't hug their child, that's true. And I see that written a lot. They've got no emotional warmth, but this child knows that they're loved. Absolutely. So that's another assumption not to make.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'm definitely personally finding that very helpful to think about. Yeah. One of the other great things you just said to me is like, don't say you must. And I really love that. Can you give an example of us doing that wrongly and maybe something else that we might do instead?
Well, sometimes when we're working with families, we say, you must stop drinking. And the way that I found that parents cooperate is just like simply changing your language to say, we encourage you to stop drinking and we will support that. And this is the benefit, this is the benefit if you sought that support. The downside to you not seeking support is this. So the choice is yours. But if the drinking continues to have the impact it may lead to us having to look at different things rather than say you must engage with DV services or you must engage with alcohol support services. We don't often, or a lot of the time, ask parents what they think would help them.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I love that just gentle movement from going, you must, to saying, I really encourage you to do that, but that is, of course, your choice. And these are some of the things that might happen or that we might have to do if that doesn't happen. But it's just stepping out of top-down speaking.
Yeah.
Is that right? Thank you. I think that's just such a helpful one. Yeah, I'd love to hear your like 3 top tips for things to do. Yeah.
three things is the first thing is not to, and it's really not to diminish a parent's role in their children's life. That's the first thing. Is the other thing is to ask parents what helped. If you say to them, if they have a social worker before, what was the other social worker? What did they do that helped? What did they do that didn't? And just to listen to, my view is that parents and children are their own experts, to ask them what they think would help. Those would be my top tips.
I absolutely love those. And so, so one of those is to ask them what they think might help. And one of the other things you just said is like, don't diminish parents and be thoughtful about like how, yeah, always know that. One of the things you said earlier, you kind of spoke a little bit to like how you might say to a child, like, mummy and daddy are doing their best. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
I think it's important that you don't go in or you don't write about a parent in a way, because children read their files. You see lots of children who say, I've gone back and read my files. And I think you have to be careful how you present their parents, because parents will be in their lives long after we're finished and gone away. And for me, when I'm talking to children about their parents, I try and talk in a way that says, mummy and daddy, or mummy and mummy, or your dads are doing the best they can, but sometimes they do things or they behave in a way or they take things that means that they're not always able to do that. But when they're not doing that, or when they're not behaving or they're not taking those things, they are doing their best. They're trying to do their best. Because I don't think parents willfully go out and not try to do their best, rather than say your parents are no good, your parents are useless, or your parents just can't do it. So that would be really important for me when talking to
I
children.
Yeah, I really love that, Elaine. I love the simplicity of just going like they're absolutely doing their best. And sometimes even when we're doing our best, we're not able to do the
To
things
do,
that we would love to be
yeah,
able to do. And that doesn't mean that we don't love and we don't care. And sometimes we're caring and loving so much that we fall
yeah,
into those things.
yeah,
Yeah. Which I mentioned to you, I was like, God, when you said that, I was like, God, that's definitely happened to me as a parent. I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, so I really love that. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you just want to set out there just before we finish?
Um, I think for me is, things work best when you develop and build a relationship with people. And that's key to any relationship. You can have the most challenging conversations if people trust you and respect you and know actually that you'll do the right thing by them. That your intention isn't to do them harm. Your intention is to help and help them feel their potential, whether that's a child or with a family. I just think keep talking.
I really like that, Elaine. And actually, I wasn't going to touch on it because I thought we'll do it in a separate conversation, but I think, which I think we will as well. But I also just thought you make a really important point there. And you said something earlier where you said, maybe when you go in, you might be asking, what helped the last time, and maybe something like what didn't work for you last time. And so that might be a really fruitful point where the person said, oh, they went into doing this without telling me, or
Yeah,
or I didn't understand. And that really gives you an opportunity to say, okay, well, I'll be really transparent when I am worried about things, which sets you up for that conversation. And you also kind of made another point, which is like, which actually Molly in another recording, which I'll share with everyone again, but she says, which was very similar, which you started with, you said maybe just start with something you've got in common. Could you speak to
yeah.
that? Yeah.
Um, I always do that, and I mean it's as simple as talking to people about, did you watch that program last night? I've had families where we've got through because we used to talk about the telly a lot, and I used to say, what do you think that character would do if they were in your position? And they'd say, oh, well, she'd be off to the pub and have a drink, or she'd do that. Or so a lot of our work was doing, what do you think would happen in that family on telly if
Yeah.
it were you? So just find some common ground that you can talk about. Because people light up when they know that you're interested. Children do. So if you've got a really difficult child, find something they like. If they like drawing, go around with a book. If they like football, say let's go to a football match. If they like singing, turn on the telly and sing and dance with them.
I absolutely love that. And I think you kind of highlighted that sometimes we can feel worried about doing that in case we say the wrong thing or we break a
Yeah,
boundary. And you were like, you said to me, if you're worried that you got something wrong, you can always come back and say, have the conversation and say, oh, I'm a bit thoughtful about what I said and I'm wondering
yeah,
how that was. And I'm so sorry that blah, blah, blah. But you said, don't be afraid of getting onto something friendly where you've got something in common, because actually that can really light someone up. And that was very strongly the message that Molly, a pause graduate, gave in her interview as well. Elaine, thank you so much. Like
you're welcome.
that's really appreciated. Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.